Welcome to the first of the zone sessions being run across ISO Week. Over the next 3 days, there'll be a variety of fascinating speakers over 3 zones: work, planet, and society. Starting today with the work zone. I am Tim McGar from BSI, the UK's national standards body. As I mentioned, the theme for today is work, but we'll primarily look at how artificial intelligence will radically change work across all sectors. My role focuses on digital standards, but at BSI will be working with a variety of artificial intelligence stakeholders for over 5 years. Internationally, we have great activities going on in terms of standards in risk management, bias, and many other topics. And probably the most fascinating one is the forthcoming management system standard on AI, which should put AI at the core of organizations. My perspective is that AI will radically change society and economies, and this means that standards will need to change as well, and we need to be thinking about this now. We have 2 great speakers today from the World Economic Forum and the International Telecommunication Union, known to most of us as the ITU. They will shortly spend some time introducing themselves and then discussing some initial thoughts on the topic. Today is really about having an interactive session. We want you to put questions to our speakers and give you the news, what you need. So I'll now hand over to our 2 speakers. Jayant, could you briefly introduce yourself, please?
Thank you so much, Tim, and thank you to BSI for having me on this panel. Great to connect with all the panelists and also the speakers joining us today. I work with the World Economic Forum's Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning platform. I'm currently managing what we call the Global AI Action Alliance, which was launched early this year to serve as a collaborative platform for incubating projects and scaling projects related to responsible AI and AI for SDGs. We work with a wide variety of stakeholders from all stakeholder groups, public sector, private sector, civil society, and the range of topics we are covering is everything from AI in financial services, mitigating bias, AI for climate change. So very excited to be here on this extremely critical topic, which always comes up. How is AI impacting the workforce? And what does it mean to be living in this era with all these new technologies?
Reinhard, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, thank you, Tim, and thank you, ISO, for inviting me. I'm the Deputy Director of the Standardization Bureau of the ITU. ITU does a lot of technical work related to machine learning. We have a very exciting group where we work together with the World Health Organization to develop a benchmarking framework on AI for health. We have been developing a machine learning toolkit for machine learning for communication networks. Over the last 4 years, we are running a challenge in the sense of a competition on machine learning 5G. And I've also spent the last 5 years together with my colleague a lot of time in putting the AI for Good platform up and running. So that's basically sort of a Netflix or a TV channel with almost daily programming to any topic related to AI. And I will be making several references probably later when I will be speaking. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to hand back to Jayant to give his initial views on the topic for today, please. Jayant, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Tim. So as I was saying, it's a topic which always comes up. There's no discussion related to artificial intelligence without the talk of workforce. And when we often hear about this topic, there's this general statement which is put out by reports by experts that jobs are being displaced, but new ones are also being created, which is true. However, the important factor here is the dichotomy. This is not an exact equivalence. The jobs which are being displaced and the kind of skills that those required are not the same as the new skills which will be required. And this transition is easier said than done. So it's for governments and private sector, as well as all the workforce, to work together on this topic and really be agile and adaptive. And some of these skills will also require they'll have a long-term horizon. It's not like you can develop data scientists in just a couple of months. So that's an important consideration for everyone. And I'd like to refer to the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report. And there are a couple of interesting insights there, which I'd like to share with the audience. So as per the report, by 2025, in many fields like data processing, administering, the share of tasks performed by machines will be over 50%. And a number of these applications will be artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithm based, which clearly says and speaks to the point that a number of these jobs will be automated in the future. And then we are also seeing rapid developments in a number of other fields. Some of you might be aware of the GPT-3, the tool which has been developed by OpenAI. There was the famous article which came out in The Guardian, which was completely written by by an algorithm, and it was virtually indistinguishable from a human author. And now they have also recently come up with a version 2, where you can basically speak to the system and it will write code for you. Still early days, but we can already see how rapidly things are changing thanks to artificial intelligence on the workforce side. Another interesting bit of information that I would like to share, again, referring back to the report, is that there will be more jobs required thanks to artificial intelligence. In fact, a number of other reports also claim that there will be actually a deficit. So there's going to be a higher demand, and governments and companies will not necessarily be able to meet the supply side. So referring to that report again, there are almost 85 million jobs which might be displaced by 2025. Or if I don't use the word displaced, it'll be like decreasing job demands. So we are talking of things like data entry clerks. We are talking of things like some form of accounting and auditing, which can be automated, bookkeeping, and some of the general management functions. Whereas we are seeing very heightened demand, almost 97 million jobs by 2025 for, as you can imagine, data analysts and scientists, AI and machine learning specialists, big data specialists, IoT specialists. So a number of these are driven by technology. But the important factor to consider here is, which is a question which everyone is trying to grapple with, how do you take this approach in a way which still keeps humans at the center of it all? And what are the important considerations also from a social safety and net perspective, especially for the people who are going to be displaced out of their workforce? There are some efforts underway on rapid reskilling as well, which will help make the workforce more agile. But as I said, it's easier said than done. And there are important considerations that that companies, that governments, that civil society have to undertake. And on that front, just sharing a couple more of my thoughts, we are also seeing at a country level, for example, if you look at the national AI strategy, which a number of countries have now developed or are undertaking effort to finish it, most of them, or practically all of them, have a heavy emphasis on the workforce side of it. Everyone has a chapter on the importance of creating a vibrant workforce, which can meet the demands of artificial intelligence and machine learning. But what is the open question over there again is, how do you build that market? It's not just about saying that we want to do this, it's actually implementing that strategy. So how do you build a vibrant market which can not just create more jobs, but also retain more jobs? And on that front, I think it's also important for the audience here and everyone to consider, where is currently the AI market? If you look across the world, every country wants to be a leader on artificial intelligence. And we already know that some of the countries are leading on that front. If you look at the US, if you look at China, and US still dominates on that front. Like most of the leading AI workforce and researchers end up in the United States. That's because of the Silicon Valley. That's because the biggest tech companies are based there. So that also leaves an open question of the amount of investment that governments will have to make, with support from the private sector, of course. So these are just some initial thoughts, but I'd love to hear from my other panelists and also then take some questions.
Thank you. It's interesting you mentioned about national AI strategies, because the UK one is going to be revised and coming out this evening, I think. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you very much for that. Reinhard, could you now give your initial perspective on the topic today? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. I think that in the long run, there will be no job and no task that a computer will not do better than a human being. So computer machines, they will be better just in anything. And therefore, in the long run, the big question is, what is the long run? in the long run, the number of jobs, of paid jobs for humans will decrease dramatically. And it's often said that jobs that require empathy or creativity or maybe dexterity are jobs where humans will continue to excel, but I don't believe that. If you take creativity, we had, for those of you who are into chess and know about AlphaZero, we had the former world chess champion, Vladimir Kamnik, on our AI for Good. And he said that the way AlphaZero is playing chess is just from a completely different planet. So you could, argue this is a maybe a simple game with well-defined rules. But if a human had played like AlphaZero was playing, you would say this is just unbelievably creative. With respect to jobs which require empathy, like caring, nursing, I think machines will also be better than human beings. A machine will know you 1,000,000 times better than you know yourself, or your spouse or your children or your friends know you. So AI coupled with bio data will just be unbeatable, and the machine will be able to manipulate you, comfort you, much better than any human being. We had also on the program of AI for Good IBM, and they have a project called IBM Debater. And they published a paper on it in Nature in March of this year. So that's a program that's debating, that's giving arguments pro and con. So you could ask the job that Tim and Jayant and I are doing here right now, is that something that a computer could do? Yes. I mean, right now it's pretty intensive. The project Debater requires a lot of resources, but I think eventually you could have a machine debating, and I'm sure the machine will be debating better than I'm debating here, on the pros and on the future of work. So even these things where you might think they may be more difficult, I think a computer will be able to do better. And with respect to dexterity, like using your hands, arm-eye coordination, quite a number of surgeries are already done by machines, and I think this will only increase. So if there are no jobs for humans, or not that many, if there's a dramatic decrease, the question is that a good thing or a bad thing? Not sure. It could be a good thing, but the way to get there could be pretty hard. I mean, the technological progress in the future may be such that future generations will be much richer and much more prosperous than we are right now, and things will become just so cheap. Many things can be manufactured. But if you have that, so people talk about abundance or plenitude, and I mean, that's a completely different economics. And we have right now economics, everything is about scarcity, but if everything is plenty, abundant, you have to think of completely different economics. The disadvantages when you get there is the inequality will decrease a lot. Yuval Harari talks about the economically useless class, lots of people who don't really have anything really to do to contribute to the economy. And so the question is, what will they do? How will they make a living? Who is going to pay them? The question related to UBS, the universal basic income, I'm somewhat skeptical. I mean, if you crunch the numbers, it seems pretty expensive. For example, if you take the United States, and let's suppose you want to give everyone $1,000 a month. So in a year, that's $10,000. So that's 10 to the $4. And let's suppose you give it to 100 million people in the US. So that's 10 to the 8. So 10 to 4 times 10 to the 8, that's 10 to the 12. That's a trillion. So you're talking a couple of $1 trillion every year that would have to be paid. That's the same amount that the Biden administration is right now trying to push through. So that sounds like a lot of money. So I'm not quite sure whether that actually works. And as Yuval Harari says, maybe like rich countries like US, Germany, UK, Switzerland and so on, Japan, they will be able, to manage somehow. But what about developing countries, or least developed countries? It's a big issue. Education is always used as maybe a panacea, and maybe not necessarily, to compete against AI and machines. And I think that's also the best weapon that we have right now. But in the future, as machines will just get better and better, education will not solve problems either. But I think that's maybe the best thing that's available right now. But one has to rethink how education is done. What's interesting is from the data that I've read and seen, right now it looks pretty, the labor market looks actually pretty good. It's true that COVID was a catastrophe for many people, especially the frontline workers. But eventually after this pandemic, I think that working conditions will be even better than they were before. And the history is full of predictions that automation will just make people unemployed, but that hasn't come true so far. Also, if you look at the robot adoption rates in different countries, countries like Japan, Korea, Singapore, Sweden, Germany, that have very high robot adoption rate, they also have low unemployment. So figures right now don't seem to be alarming, but I think in the longer run, with the society, governments, everyone will really have to rethink how machines and AI are affecting society. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you very much for that. Two very fascinating presentations. We've already had some great questions coming through. Please keep sending them through. So I'm going to sort of augment one of the questions that's come through already. So the questions we had is, have any countries successfully implemented AI applications to enhance the efficiency of the public sector? And I'd like to expand that. So, but what other sectors are doing well? You mentioned in your two presentations, obviously 5G, healthcare, financial services, but which are the sectors that are doing well and have been rapidly changed, and where does the public sector sit within that? Do you have a view on that, Jayant, to begin with?
Sure. I think it's still in, AI is being utilized in a number of sectors, and some of which also fall into the slightly sensitive domain, including facial recognition, which a number of countries justify as necessary for their national security. But in terms, that's an excellent question, actually. So thank you to whoever posed that question. On the actual efficiency side of the public sector, anything to do with AI, the classic statement starts with data. So for a number of governments, there are efforts underway across sectors. And this includes the work that we are doing through our center in India with the state of Telangana, where there's a project called Artificial Intelligence for Agricultural Innovation. And we are currently scoping out and building out the modalities of a public data management system, really classifying what is the personally identifiable data if you're collecting data at a farmer level, and what does that mean in terms of forecasting, what does that mean in terms of farming insurance. So there are sectors like that where it's being definitely used. There are also certain countries which are increasingly using it, for example, for automated chatbots. And this came out especially during COVID, where a number of applications were rolled out where people could pose questions to automated chatbots and robots. And we often also hear from some of our stakeholders, what is the important factor here is also the governance aspect of it. If a government is really procuring AI, to ensure that you're looking at the governance and regulation side of it and making sure that it's not a biased application that's being put forth. And the last point over there is that governments are also now trying to utilize it to make some of their internal processes more efficient. If you look at the use of AI in law, there are, on the private sector side at least, there are a couple of startups which help read through and scan through tons and tons of pages of legal documents, and some of them are actually proving to be better than humans and then analyzing and giving insights. So governments are also in early stages of exploring that, because there's a big backlog on the judiciary and the legal processes side to actually improve the access to justice. But some of these efforts are still in early stages. They're also considering things like actually leveraging AI for better decision making, removing some of the red tape, cutting down some of the bureaucracy, even on the actual procurement decision-making side. But I would say it's still a little bit in the early stages, but lots happening. Back to you, Tim.
Reinhard, do you have a perspective on that question?
Yeah, I mean, one country to look at is Estonia. So we had the chief data officer of Estonia on AI for Good. And Estonia is a pretty small country with a bit more than 1 million people. But they not just have a strategy, just a piece of paper. They actually have a lot of projects that implement AI. They have over 50 projects that uses AI. They also use AI in various government services. Some like chat boxes, one example. But also, for example, in checking whether farmers who receive a loan or whether a subsidy, whether they really use it to plant or work their fields, and they do satellite imagery, and then they use AI to detect whether farmers are actually doing what they said they would be doing. So they also have publicly available documentation. So I really recommend you to look at what Estonia is doing. To add to what Jayant was saying, the financial sector is a sector where AI is being used heavily. So whether you get a loan or not, that is more and more often going to be decided by AI tools. And the internet companies, Google, Facebook, Amazon, Alibaba, Tencent, and so on, I mean, in their recommendation systems, they make a lot of use of AI. The huge potential that AI has is in the health sector, AI plus health, and it could do so much good. But it's a difficult topic, and that's why we, together with the World Health Organization, are trying to come up with a benchmarking system that's actually checking the quality of AI solutions, so that you can actually that you can trust an AI solution. Thank you.
Thank you. So coming back to the point about various AI strategies, someone else has asked. So Sadhvir has asked about key pillars of national AI strategies. And a while ago, I did a paper sort of pulling out the first set, and that was about 8. And there's been a lot more since then. And I mentioned the UK is updating it today, and many other countries are already onto their sort of second version. I mean, what have you seen as some of the key parts that come out of those national AI strategies? And are there, apart from the work Estonia is doing, who are very well known on their sort of digital leadership, where else are other good countries to point to in terms of the leadership the governments are taking around artificial intelligence?
I can go first. So Tim, if you're referring to the number of countries, I believe, and it might be I think there are over 40 countries which have national AI strategies now. The approaches, if you look at the basic building blocks, are somewhat similar, as I was saying. How do you really build that ecosystem for AI? How do you get the right kind of infrastructure? I mean, it's a big topic as well. It's one thing to say that we want to roll out AI and ML applications all around, but if you don't have the access to the right kind of infrastructure, it won't really work. And then workforce is definitely one of them. The countries that one should be looking at is obviously, so Singapore is a good example. They have taken a very sector-specific approach to begin with. It's a small country again, but they have prioritized 4 or 5 sectors and then build their strategy accordingly. So things like shipping and logistics features in there, things like traffic management features in there. If you look at bigger countries like India, they have rolled out a very comprehensive national AI strategy as well, with some of these blocks and details on how to actually go about building these individual pillars on it as well. One important thing that I'll reiterate is the funding that is going in. And US recently proposed 6 billion in spending on artificial intelligence. So that's a key driver when governments themselves are putting in that much money. That's an important consideration. And I would also say that Turkey recently released its national AI strategy as well, which was done in collaboration with the World Economic Forum. So I would also encourage the participants to have a look at that. And really, I think now what we're talking about, Tim, as you said, the UK is releasing its revised strategy. It's not just about building a strategy, but really having that roadmap. And that's where most of the action is happening.
Yeah, interestingly, the country, or one of the countries which does not have an AI strategy, that's Switzerland. And on purpose, they said, we don't want to focus on a particular technology. So you don't have to have an AI strategy to do well. I think what would be important for governments is put emphasis on education, and I think in particular also education in the age of school children, high school. I think it would be really very important to teach data science. Maybe you want to drop something in math. Maybe you don't want to teach calculus anymore, and but maybe data science instead. And the way things are being taught in school is still the way things have been taught in school for hundreds of years. The MOOCs, the massive online open courses, I'm a huge fan of that. I think this is just fantastic. And but a lot would still need to be done with the support of governments with respect to education.
Thank you. So we've only got a couple of minutes left. So I just want to, if you could briefly we'll cover one last question, which has come from Adria Bedard-Smith, which is, what jobs will be available for humans if computers do all the interesting ones? So if you could just briefly give reviews on that, and we'll close off after that. So Reinhard, what will be left that's interesting for people?
Who's first, me?
Or,
yeah. Well, as I said in my opening, I think eventually maybe nothing. So,
okay, Jens, your perspective.
That may not necessarily a bad thing, but I'm giving you. I mean, it's a favorite question to ask people. What would you recommend your son, your daughter to study, to learn, which job to take? And I like Yuval Harari's answer, who said, don't ask old people. I'm biased, and I would say you should study physics. I think physics actually gives you the best maybe frame of mind to tackle problems. But that's maybe not for everyone. But
Jayant?
It's a tough question. So my views are that yes, machines will take away a number of jobs, but I would say I'm probably not as we're not like so when it comes to when that will happen, my timeline is slightly different, and I'm also going by the current limitations still in the field of artificial intelligence. Yes, Reinhard shared a number of great examples, including the IBM debater platform, but many uses of AI are still in the narrow domain. And when it comes to the general intelligence of a system, there are still quite a few leaps that are required. So I think the big consideration is for us to see, like when you are charting out that path, how are you doing it in as inclusive a way as possible, if that's still possible? Or have we already reached a point where there is so much gap in the system that you might not be able to overcome it? But it's, at the end of the day, for now, it's the humans who are building out these AI and ML systems. So how do you do that in a democratic way? And what are the important considerations for it? Still require a lot of human inputs. So I don't have an exact answer on the specific workforce, but yes, develop a multifaceted skill set for sure.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Reinhard, from ITU, and Janet from the World Economic Forum for that very fascinating set of answers. And judging from the questions we've had through, people are really thinking about this and seeing how much it's going to change things. So for the rest of you online, the next work zone session is in 3 hours' time. It is entitled I Am Mecha Borg, and it's going to get you thinking even more, because we've got 6 senior national standards body and ISO people being interviewed for a job by an artificial intelligence. It's definitely not one to be missed. Thank you all for coming today, and thank you for your fantastic questions, and thank you again to our great speakers.
Thank you.